Hi, it's Alex Cosper at the American River for another SacTV.com Riverside Chat. Today I want to talk about how the present and history are related, but in many ways, past, present, and future are all combined. Thanks to YouTube. So just by watching this video, you are participating in the past, present, and future, and so am I. I mean, in the present, I'm making this video, which will soon become part of my past, and that'll be in the future. So, who were the presidents who came to Sacramento? And believe it or not, most of them of the past century have come to Sacramento. Anyway, let's get back to the first president who ever came to Sacramento, and that was Ulysses S. Grant, but that was after he was president. He went on a world tour after that and then came to Sacramento in 1879. And so he Hayes was president at that time. He had a parade that greeted him here in Sacramento. President Grant, ex-President Grant. And the next president to come to Sacramento was Rutherford B. Hayes. A guy that history forgets, partly because he won the election. Some say he stole the election of 1876. That was where the Democrat Samuel Tilden actually won the popular vote and the electoral vote, but they decided to hold the votes in Florida and then kind of argue a bit like who deserved those electoral votes. They eventually gave them to Hayes after a deal was made between the two parties. See, in that election, the parties were bigger than the candidates. Hayes came to Sacramento in 1880, and he visited the California State Fair. Back then it was at the state capitol downtown. The next president to visit Sacramento was Theodore Roosevelt. So you had several presidents in between Hayes and TR. But TR came to Sacramento in 1903. He spoke to the state legislature at the Capitol, and he also visited McKinley Park, which was named after President William McKinley, who was assassinated in 1901. And that's why Teddy Roosevelt was sworn in as the youngest president at that time. So after Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft came to Sacramento in 1911, and that was after future President Woodrow Wilson visited San Francisco in 1910. I don't know if Wilson ever came to Sacramento, but San Francisco's pretty close, and sometimes because Sacramento's in the shadow of San Francisco, we kind of talk about them as the same region. So after that, the next president to, Harding did not visit Sacramento, but he died in San Francisco, August 2nd, 1923. It's still kind of a mystery how he died. He went on a trip. It was kind of in the middle of a brewing scandal that was emerging, and he eventually got buried in history because of that scandal called the Teapot Dome scandal. It had to do with government contracts being awarded to buddies. It had to do with bribery, and so he got buried in history, even though he was president during the roaring 20s and in the ramp up to the big stock market rally of the 20s, which led to a big crash at the end of the decade. Herbert Hoover, who was the Commerce Secretary, throughout the 20s. He announced his candidacy for presidency in 1928 at the Ride Hotel, just south of Sacramento. And that's a very legendary hotel because it had to do with speakeasies in the 1920s, you know, underground bars that were illegal at the time. Hoover then, he won by a landslide in 1928 because the stock market was still rallying, but in 1929, the following year, it crashed. So it led into the Great Depression, and so Hoover was blamed for that. And in 1932, even though he came to Sacramento to campaign, not that that helped in any way, he was trounced by a landslide by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the governor of New York. And Roosevelt benefited from radio. He did fireside chats, so he was a radio star by then. And what's ironic is Herbert Hoover was in charge of the radio industry as the Commerce Secretary at that time, prior to the FCC. And Hoover is the guy who made laws about radio broadcasting, but he was kind of for deregulation. Like, he wasn't for a lot of heavy regulation. He just didn't want advertisers to control the industry. He wanted the public to own the airwaves. But FDR won, and FDR revamped everything. FDR introduced the FCC with the New Deal. It was a whole new government to try to save America from the Depression. And so FDR was elected 4 times, but he never came to Sacramento. His successor, however, Harry Truman, did come to Sacramento to campaign in 1948. And Truman actually was not favored to win that election. He was the underdog, and even though he was the sitting president, but he won anyway in an upset over Thomas Dewey. And that itself was history, that he won by an upset. But he visited Sacramento in 1948 on a train ride during his campaign. The next president, Eisenhower, did not visit Sacramento during his term, but he did visit Sacramento like in 1918 when he was with the military. He led a military convoy through Sacramento, kind of to demonstrate the military, just showcase certain things about it. But when he was president, his vice president, Richard Nixon, of course, visited Sacramento many times and did not really have a favorable view of it, according to a phone call he had with future President Ronald Reagan while Nixon was president of the United States. Kennedy did not come to Sacramento during his term, but during the campaign of 1960, he rolled in on a train and made a campaign speech. And before that, he had addressed the state capitol legislature in 1959 while he was senator of Massachusetts. LBJ visited Sacramento in 1964 during his campaign. And then, of course, Nixon was a Californian, and we already talked about him, but he didn't really campaign much in Sacramento, although in 1962 he ran for governor of California, in which he would have been sitting in Sacramento at the state capitol had he won, but he lost to Pat Brown, father of Jerry Brown. Okay, so after Nixon, of course, resigned in disgrace in 1974 due to the Watergate scandal, in which he was trying to block an investigation. So Nixon resigned in disgrace, and his hand-picked successor, the unelected Gerald R. Ford, suddenly was president. the first man in history not elected on a national ticket to the United States White House. What did he do immediately after he became president? He pardoned his buddy Richard Nixon, which was probably part of some deal. So for any crimes that Nixon may have committed as president, all that stuff was exonerated thanks to Ford pardoning Nixon. And then a year later, Ford came to Sacramento and he was involved in an assassination attempt. Squeaky Fromme from the Manson family pulled out a gun in front of Ford when he was walking in front of the state capitol. He was going to meet with Jerry Brown. He actually did, and in that meeting, no one told Brown that there was an assassination attempt on Ford, so he was shocked later on when he found out, however he found out. Anyway, Ford faced another assassination attempt later that month in September 1975, this time in San Francisco. Another woman, this time she actually fired a shot at him. Her name was Sarah Jane Moore. And so that was weird history right there. President being facing 2 assassination attempts in 1 month, both by women. Okay, so the next president to visit Sacramento, well, Jimmy Carter. I saw them. I was there. Jimmy Carter was there in 1978 on the K Street Mall to endorse Jerry Brown for his re-election as governor of California. And so there were a bunch of California Democrats all there and making speeches. Carter made a speech. And so I took the day off from school just to see President Carter. And he was the first president I ever saw in real life. The only one after that I saw was Bill Clinton. Reagan, of course, was governor of California, so he was in Sacramento all those years from 1967 to 1975. And then when he was president, he came in 1984 and campaigned in Sacramento. After him, Bush 1 came to Sacramento at some point. I don't know much about that visit. And then Bill Clinton came to Sacramento. I told you I saw him. I went to McClellan Air Force Base. That was in 1993. And that was him observing the Air Force Base, trying to decide if it should be shut down. It eventually was. Because he was into, you know, downsizing the military at that time. And after that, let's see, Bush 2 was president. Yes, he made a visit to Sacramento. I think it was more to El Dorado Hills for some kind of fundraiser thing. And then Obama visited Sacramento. He went to the California State Fair, I think in 2011. And he made a few other visits to the area. He went to Woodland at one point, South Lake Tahoe at one point. I don't know how many times he actually came to Sacramento though. And then after that, Trump came to Sacramento a few times, at least 2 times, maybe more than that. But one time was, both times it was meeting with Governor Gavin Newsom. First time it was about the wildfires, you know, in which like 85 people were killed in the city of Paradise. And Trump got the name of the city wrong. He called it Pleasure. And he said that the wildfires had to do with people not managing the forest, when really, if he had done any research on it, he would have found out that it was because wires came down from PG&E, old wires, and that's how the fire started. and PG&E had to pay some heavy fines for that. Finally, then Biden came to Sacramento, and during the COVID era, and that was, I believe, 2021, his first year. So there you have it, the presidents of the United States who came to Sacramento, most of them of the past century.